What if the fat sitting deepest inside your abdomen, the fat you cannot pinch, the fat wrapped around your liver and your intestines, could be quietly encouraged to shrink while you are doing absolutely nothing but sleeping? Not through a pill, not through a punishing new workout, but through something as simple as a warm cup you drink before you turn off the lights. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because I am about to walk you through 7 of these drinks, one by one, and explain exactly why they work, exactly how to prepare them, and exactly who should be careful with them. Visceral fat is not like the fat under your skin. The fat on your arms or your thighs is mostly inert. It sits there, it stores energy, and that's largely the end of its job. Visceral fat is different. It wraps
Not
itself
all
around
body
your
fat
liver,
is the
your
same.
pancreas, and
Visceral
your
fat
intestines,
stores around
and it
your
behaves
internal
less
organs
like storage and more like an active gland.
to carry
It
hidden health
manufactures
risks.
inflammatory
Not all
signals
body
around
fat
the
is the
clock.
same.
It disrupts
Subcutaneous
the way your
fat
body
lies directly
responds
under the
to
skin.
insulin.
Visceral
And over
fat
years,
stores deeper
it
around
becomes
your
one of the
organs
strongest predictors
and
I
carries
see in my
much
own
higher health
patients
risks.
for high blood
Hello,
pressure,
I'm Dr.
type
Smith,
2
and
diabetes,
today we're discussing
fatty
your heart
liver,
health.
and
Prevention
cardiovascular
is always
disease.
better than a cure.
My name is
Together,
Michael Renner.
we can make
I
informed
have spent
choices
close
for
to
your
3
future.
decades in internal medicine, focused heavily on metabolic health in adults over 50, and I want to be upfront with you before we go any further. Nothing I am about to describe is a substitute for a proper diet, movement, sleep, and medical care. What these 7 drinks can do is support processes your body is already trying to run every night, if you give it the right raw materials. It's worth pausing for a moment on
When we
why
eat,
the evening
our body breaks
specifically
down
matters
food into
so much
glucose.
for this
Insulin acts
particular
like a
kind
key,
of fat.
unlocking cell
During the
insulin
day,
resistance.
your
The
body
cells
is
ignore the
largely in
signal.
what we call
Glucose
a
builds up
fed
in the
state,
bloodstream, raising blood
absorbing
sugar.
nutrients,
Now let's take a
managing the
quick listen
aftermath
to your
of
heart and
meals,
lungs.
responding to activity and
I
stress.
have been feeling much
At
better
night,
lately.
if conditions are right, your body shifts
Everything
into
looks
something
great. You are
closer
in
to a
excellent
repair
shape.
state. Growth hormone rises.
Comprehensive
Cellular repair
care
processes activate.
requires
Your
understanding.
liver in particular uses the overnight fasting window to do a great deal of its housekeeping, processing the day's fats, managing cholesterol, and beginning to draw on stored fat, including visceral fat, for fuel. This
Today,
shift does
we are
not happen
exploring simple
automatically
ways
or
to improve
reliably
your
for
daily
everyone.
posture at home.
It depends heavily
Remember,
on what
these
your blood
tips
sugar
are for
and
educational
stress
purposes
hormones are
only.
doing
They are
as
not
you
a
fall
substitute
asleep.
for medical care.
If you go to bed with elevated blood sugar, a heavy meal still being digested, or cortisol still running high from an anxious day, that repair window gets shortened or interrupted, and your body
Cortisol
spends
follows
more
a
of the
strict
night managing
rhythm. It
digestion
spikes
and
sharply in the
stress,
morning to wake
rather
you up.
than doing the
Then
deeper
it
metabolic
gradually,
work you
reaching
actually
its
want it
lowest
doing.
point around midnight
This is
for a
precisely
perfect,
why
healthy
the timing and
24-hour
preparation
cycle.
of each of these 7 drinks matters as much as the ingredients themselves. A good compound taken at the wrong time, or on top of a heavy meal, will not deliver the same benefit. Before we start, if this kind of practical, evidence-informed health content is useful to you, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely helps this information reach more people who need it. And I'd love to know in the comments, which of these 7 have you already tried, and did you notice anything? Now, let's get into the first one. The first drink, seed tea. Fennel is one of the oldest digestive remedies in recorded medicine, used across Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and South Asian traditions for thousands of years, and modern research has started to explain why it earned that reputation. Fennel seeds contain a compound called anethole, along with a range of other plant oils, that appear to relax the smooth muscle lining your digestive tract. What this means practically is that fennel tends to reduce bloating, trapped gas, and that heavy, distended feeling many people associate with a slow evening digestion. Now, why does this matter for visceral fat specifically? Because chronic bloating and a sluggish gut are frequently signs of a digestive system working inefficiently, and an inefficient gut tends to correlate with poor nutrient absorption and a stressed gut lining, both of which are linked in current research to systemic inflammation. The same low-grade inflammation that keeps visceral fat metabolically active. Fennel also has a mild, gentle effect on satiety. Many of my patients tell me that a warm cup after dinner reduces the urge to keep snacking late into the evening, which on its own removes a significant source of unnecessary caloric intake at the worst possible time of day. To prepare it, crush 1 teaspoon of fennel seeds lightly with the back of a spoon to help release their oils, then steep them in a cup of hot water for about 10 minutes, covered so the aromatic compounds don't escape with the steam. Strain and drink it warm, ideally 30 to 40 minutes after your last meal. One caution worth naming: fennel has mild estrogen-like plant compounds, So if you have a hormone-sensitive condition, or you are on hormone therapy, mention this one to your doctor before making it a nightly habit. The second drink is fenugreek tea, and this is one I recommend often, particularly for patients who are already managing borderline blood sugar. Fenugreek seeds are rich in a soluble fiber called galactomannan. When this fiber meets liquid in your stomach, it swells and forms a kind of gel, and that gel physically slows the rate at which sugar from your evening meal is absorbed into your bloodstream. Slower sugar absorption means a gentler insulin response, and a gentler insulin response means your body is less likely to be pushed into fat storage mode overnight. There is a reasonable body of clinical research, much of it from India where fenugreek is used medicinally, showing measurable improvements in fasting blood sugar and cholesterol markers with regular fenugreek use. Beyond blood sugar, fenugreek has a mild appetite moderating effect, which again is most useful in the evening, when unstructured snacking does the most damage to a calorie balance built earlier in the day. To prepare it, soak 1 teaspoon of whole fenugreek seeds in a cup of water for a few hours, or overnight if that's easier, then bring that same water to a gentle simmer for about 5 minutes. Strain it and get warm. If soaking overnight isn't practical, a quick simmer of the dry seeds for 8 to 10 minutes also works, though the flavor is more bitter. One important caution: fenugreek can lower blood sugar meaningfully. If you are on insulin or any oral diabetes medication, this combination needs to be discussed with your physician, because the drink can compound the drug's effect and increase your risk of a low blood sugar episode. I'll add one more clinical detail here because I think it's genuinely useful and rarely explained well. Fenugreek's fiber doesn't just slow sugar absorption from just 8. It also appears to have a modest effect on the following morning's blood sugar response, something researchers sometimes call a second meal effect. In simple terms, a fiber-rich evening intervention can influence how your body handles the next day, likely because the fermentation of that fiber by your gut bacteria produces short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity system-wide. This is one of the more elegant examples of how an evening habit can ripple into the following day's metabolic performance, rather than being a purely isolated, one-off effect. The third drink is holy basil tea, also known as tulsi, and I bring this one up because it addresses something the first two don't: your nervous system. In traditional Ayurvedic medicine, tulsi is described as an adaptogen, and while that word gets used loosely in wellness marketing, there is now a growing body of research on a specific category of plant compounds that appear to help the body regulate its stress response more efficiently, and tulsi is one of the better studied examples. Here is why this matters for visceral fat. Chronic, unresolved stress keeps cortisol elevated, and cortisol that stays elevated into the evening, instead of dropping the way it should as bedtime approaches, sends a direct signal to your body to conserve and store energy, and it preferentially stores that energy as abdominal fat. This is a survival adaptation from a time when stress meant famine or physical danger, and your biology hasn't caught up to the fact that most modern stress is psychological rather than physical. Several small clinical studies on tulsi have shown modest reductions in self-reported stress and in cortisol markers with regular use over a period of weeks. It also has a pleasant, slightly peppery, clove-like aroma that many people find genuinely calming as part of a wind-down routine, which matters more than it sounds. The ritual of a warm drink before bed is itself a signal to your nervous system that the day is ending. To prepare it, steep a small handful of fresh tulsi leaves, or 1 teaspoon of the dried leaf, in hot water for about 7 minutes, covered. Strain and drink it around 45 minutes before you intend to sleep. Tulsi is broadly well tolerated, but it can have a mild blood-thinning effect and can interact with certain blood pressure and diabetes medications, so if you're on multiple prescriptions, it's worth a quick conversation with your pharmacist or doctor. I want to spend one more moment on cortisol, because I think it's the most misunderstood piece of this entire puzzle. Cortisol is not the enemy. You need it, and healthy people show a natural rhythm where it peaks shortly after waking and gradually tapers through the day, reaching its lowest point around the middle of the night. The problem isn't cortisol itself. It's a flattened or reversed rhythm, where it stays elevated into the evening instead of tapering, which is exactly what chronic stress and poor sleep habits tend to produce over months and years. In my clinic, when I see patients with stubborn abdominal fat that hasn't responded to reasonable diet and exercise changes, a flattened cortisol rhythm is one of the first things I start to suspect, particularly in patients juggling caregiving responsibilities, financial pressure, or long-term sleep disruption. A calming evening ritual, Tulsi included, is not a cure for chronic stress, but it can be one small, repeatable signal that tells your nervous system the day is winding down, and those repeatable signals, done consistently, are part of how you gradually retrain that rhythm back toward normal. The fourth drink is rooibos tea, a naturally caffeine-free red tea from South Africa that I recommend specifically to patients who love the ritual of a warm evening tea, but are sensitive to any hint of stimulation before bed. Rooibos is rich in two flavonoid compounds called aspalathin and nothofagin, which are fairly unique to this plant and have been the subject of a growing number of laboratory and early clinical studies. What researchers have observed is that these compounds may help support healthier glucose metabolism and may assist in reducing the formation of new fat cells, a process scientists call adipogenesis. I want to be careful here. Most of this evidence comes from cell and animal studies, with human trials still limited, so I'm not going to oversell it. What I can tell you confidently, from both the literature and from my own patients, is that rooibos is an excellent, genuinely relaxing, antioxidant-rich substitute for people who are drinking sugary evening beverages or one too many cups of regular tea or coffee out of habit. Simply replacing an evening soda or a milky, sugared chai with unsweetened rooibos, night after night, removes a meaningful and consistent source of hidden sugar from your routine, and that alone, sustained over months, matters more for visceral fat than almost anything else on this list. To prepare it, steep 1 rooibos tea bag or 1 tablespoon of loose rooibos in a cup of just boiled water for 5 to 7 minutes. Because it has no caffeine, there is no strict cutoff time. Many of my patients drink it right up until bedtime. It's one of the gentlest drinks on this list, with very few known interactions, making it a safe daily habit for almost everyone. The fifth drink is chamomile tea with a small pinch of cinnamon added, and I've paired these two deliberately because together they address two separate problems at once: sleep quality and blood sugar stability. Let's start with chamomile on its own. Chamomile contains a compound called apigenin, which binds to certain receptors in the brain associated with reducing anxiety and promoting drowsiness. Reliable, uninterrupted sleep is not a minor detail in this conversation. It is arguably the single most important factor. Poor sleep has been repeatedly linked in research to increased hunger hormones the next day, reduced insulin sensitivity, and a measurable increase in abdominal fat storage over time, independent of diet. In other words, you can eat well and exercise consistently, and still struggle with visceral fat if your sleep is consistently poor, because sleep deprivation itself disrupts the hormones that regulate appetite and fat storage. Now, the cinnamon. Even a small amount of true cinnamon, roughly 1/8 of a teaspoon, has been shown in multiple studies to modestly improve insulin sensitivity, meaning your cells respond more efficiently to insulin's signal to clear sugar from the blood. Combined with chamomile's calming effect, this pairing essentially prepares both your mind and your metabolism for the repair work your body does during deep sleep. To prepare it, steep 1 chamomile tea bag or a tablespoon of dried chamomile flowers in hot water for 5 minutes, then stir in a small pinch of true Ceylon cinnamon, not the common cassia variety sold in most supermarkets, since cassia contains higher levels of coumarin, a compound that can stress the liver in large or frequent doses. Drink this about 30 minutes before bed. Chamomile is generally very safe, though if you have a known allergy to ragweed or related plants, you should avoid it, as cross-reactions are possible. The sixth drink is moringa leaf tea, sometimes called the miracle tree tea, and while I'm always cautious of that kind of marketing language, moringa does have a genuinely impressive and well-documented nutritional profile. Moringa leaves are dense in plant compounds called isothiocyanates, along with a wide range of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Several clinical studies, particularly out of India and parts of Africa where moringa is a dietary staple, have shown associations between regular moringa consumption and improvements in fasting blood sugar, cholesterol profiles, and markers of inflammation. From a mechanistic standpoint, the working theory is that moringa's compounds help protect the pancreas and support more efficient glucose regulation, which, as we've discussed with several of these drinks already, is directly tied to how much of your evening food ends up stored as fat versus used as energy. What I appreciate most about moringa clinically is how nutrient-dense it is for very few calories. For patients who are working on their eating patterns and want an evening drink that supports the diet rather than works against it, moringa is one of the most nutritionally complete options on this list. To prepare it, steep 1 teaspoon of dried moringa leaf powder or a moringa tea bag in hot water for about 6 minutes. It has a mild, slightly earthy, green flavor, not unlike matcha but softer. One caution: moringa root and bark, not the leaf, have been associated with safety concerns and should be avoided entirely. Always confirm you are using leaf-only products from a reputable source, and if you are on blood pressure or blood sugar medication, monitor how you respond, since moringa can mildly enhance both effects. What continues to draw researchers to moringa is how broad its nutritional footprint is compared to almost any other single leaf. Gram for gram, dried moringa leaf contains meaningful amounts of calcium, iron, and potassium, alongside a respectable amount of plant protein, which is unusual for a tea-type ingredient. For older adults specifically, where iron deficiency anemia and inadequate calcium intake are both common findings on routine blood work, an evening habit that quietly contributes to these numbers, even modestly, is worth something beyond its effect on fat metabolism alone. I also want to note that moringa's antioxidant density, largely from compounds called quercetin and chlorogenic acid, appears in some studies to help protect the lining of blood vessels from the kind of oxidative stress that visceral fat's inflammatory output tends to cause over time. In other words, it may be doing double duty, supporting healthier glucose handling while also helping guard against some of the downstream cardiovascular consequences of visceral fat that concern me most as a physician. The seventh and final drink is spearmint tea, and I've saved this one for last because it plays a slightly different, more specific role than the others, particularly for women navigating hormonal shifts around perimenopause and menopause, a period during which visceral fat accumulation accelerates for many of my female patients, even without any change in diet. Spearmint has been studied specifically for its mild anti-androgenic properties, meaning it may help modestly reduce excess androgen activity, which in turn has been associated in some studies with improvement in symptoms like unwanted facial hair and acne in conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, alongside modest support for a more balanced hormonal profile. Beyond the hormonal angle, spearmint is also a reliable, gentle digestive aid, similar in some ways to fennel, helping to ease bloating and support smoother digestion after your evening meal. It has a naturally sweet, cooling flavor that many people find far more palatable as a bedtime drink than more bitter options, which matters for consistency. The best drink on this list is the one you'll actually keep drinking, night after night, for months. To prepare it, steep a small handful of fresh spearmint leaves, or 1 teaspoon of the dried herb, in hot water for about 8 minutes, then strain and drink it warm. Spearmint is very well tolerated overall, but because of its mild hormonal activity, women who are pregnant, breastfeeding, or on hormonal medication should check with their doctor before making it a daily habit. Now, having walked through all 7, I want to bring this back to something I tell every patient who asks me about a specific food, drink, or supplement for visceral fat. None of these 7 drinks are a mechanism on their own. They are supports for mechanisms your body already runs every single night, provided you give it the conditions to do so. Those conditions are not exotic. They are, frankly, the same handful of fundamentals that show up in every serious study on visceral fat reduction, and no tea replaces them. You need a diet built around whole foods, adequate protein to preserve muscle mass as you age, fiber from vegetables and legumes, and a meaningful reduction in refined sugar and industrial seed oils, because these are the foods that most directly drive the insulin spikes and inflammation that keep visceral fat active. You need regular movement, and it does not need to be extreme, consistent walking, resistance training a few times a week, and simply avoiding long, unbroken periods of sitting all measurably reduce visceral fat over time in the research. You need sleep, 7 to 8 hours of it, at a consistent time, because as I mentioned with the chamomile, poor sleep alone can undo a great deal of otherwise good work. And you need some honest attention to stress, because chronically elevated cortisol will keep sending your body a store fat signal regardless of how well you eat. These 7 drinks work best when they sit inside that larger structure. They are a nightly ritual that reinforces good habits, gently nudges digestion and blood sugar in a favorable direction, and gives you a moment of calm before bed, which on its own has value. A few practical notes to close with, because I want this to be something you can actually use, not just something you watched. Don't try all at once. Pick 1 or 2 that address whatever is most relevant to you right now. If bloating is your main complaint, start with fennel. If blood sugar is your concern, start with fenugreek or cinnamon and chamomile. If stress feels like the bigger issue, start with tulsi. Give whichever one you choose a genuine trial of 6 to 8 weeks before judging whether it's doing anything, because these are gentle, cumulative effects, not overnight transformations, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. Keep your evening meal at least 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, regardless of which tea you drink, because your digestive system and your repair and recovery processes compete for the same limited resources overnight, and a heavy, late meal will win that competition every time, leaving little energy left over for the deeper metabolic work you're trying to support. And please, if you are on any regular medication, particularly for blood pressure, blood sugar, or blood clotting, take 30 seconds to whichever of these drinks you're adding to your routine to your doctor or pharmacist at your next visit. Nearly all of these interactions are mild and manageable, but mild and manageable only stays that way when someone with your full medical picture is aware of what you're doing. I also want to say something about consistency, because it's the piece of this that people underestimate the most. None of these 7 drinks are going to produce a visible difference after 3 nights, or even 3 weeks, and if a video or a product ever promises you that, I'd encourage you to be skeptical of it. Visceral fat accumulates slowly over years in response to thousands of small daily decisions, and it recedes the same way. Slowly, in response to thousands of small daily decisions, stacked in the other direction. What I've seen work, consistently, in patients who actually make progress, isn't intensity, it's boredom. The willingness to do a modest, unglamorous thing, night after night, for months, without needing constant proof that it's working. Track things that aren't the scale, how your waistbands fit after 6 weeks, whether you're waking up less groggy, whether afternoon energy crashes are less severe, whether bloating after meals has eased. These are often the earliest, most honest signals that something is shifting well before a scale or a tape measure will confirm it. One last practical point worth mentioning is water itself. Every one of these 7 drinks is, at its base, mostly water, and that's not incidental. Many older adults run mildly dehydrated without realizing it, partly because the sensation of thirst becomes less reliable with age, and mild chronic dehydration on its own can make you feel fatigued, can mildly elevate resting heart rate, and can make your kidneys work harder to do the same job. Building an evening tea habit is, among other things, enjoyable way a cup of fluid to your day when you might otherwise be reaching for something less useful, and that alone, layered on top of everything else we've discussed, is a meaningful piece of the picture. None of what I've shared today is meant to replace medical care, and if you have significant, unexplained weight changes or symptoms like persistent fatigue, swelling, or changes in your blood pressure or blood sugar readings, please see your doctor rather than trying to manage it with tea alone. What I hope you take from this video instead is a set of small, low-risk, well-supported habits you can fold into a routine you already have, the last 20 minutes before you go to sleep, and let them do their quiet work alongside everything else you're already doing for your health. If there's one thought I want you to leave with, it's this: your body isn't working against you. Even the fat it's storing in places you don't want it was, at some point, a reasonable response to the inputs it was receiving. The meals, the stress, the sleep, the movement or lack of it. Change those inputs gently and consistently, give your evenings a little more structure and a little less sugar and stress, and your body tends to respond in kind, on its own timeline, without needing to be forced. That's really all these 7 drinks are: a small, deliberate signal, repeated every night, that tells your body it's safe to stop storing and start repairing. If you found this useful, let me know in the comments which one you're going to try first, and I'll see you in the next video.